Trust me when I say this video goes deeper than you think. I strongly recommend discussions in the comments as there are bound to be many different theories here. Oh, and spoilies. Before Marika ascended to godhood, before the Greater Will sent the Elden Beast to transform the Great Tree into the Erd Tree, and possibly even before the emergence of life from the primordial soup of the Crucible, there were dragons. Immortal beings of unimaginable power who wielded a devastating control over lightning and whose bodies were covered in scales as hard as stone. Not only did they inhabit the prehistoric era of the lands between, they ruled them. When you first enter the world, you'll notice an abundance of rubble and even entire intact ruins scattered everywhere. Investigating these areas will often yield you ruined fragments, items which are stone fragments found near places where ruins have fallen from the sky. These shards of stone are believed to have once been part of a temple in the sky. This wasn't a temple of gods, nor was it a temple for any of the humanoid beings who populated the lands between. This was a temple of dragons, a temple of the first true Elden Lord. Before we go any further, it is important that you know the hierarchy of the dragons in the present day of the lands between. Ancient dragons still exist, though they are very scarce these days. Ancient dragons are true dragons with 4 legs and dedicated wings from the days before the Erd Tree. Dragons with scales of stone and powerful lightning attacks. These dragons include Lichdragon Fortisaxx, Gransaxx, Lannsseax, sister of Fortisaxx, and the Azula dragons, which are kind of like mobs you'll run into later in the game. We then have Greyll, who you probably remember as the giant dragon that gives you a ton of runes. Greyll is the only dragon the game considers to be an elder dragon. Greyll was the mother of all dragons and dwarfed all who stood before her like a looming mountain. It's important to note that Greyll isn't actually the mother of all dragons though. Not really. Greyll is the mother of all new dragons, the dragons we more commonly see throughout the lands between. These dragons no longer have the signature stone-like scales and have adapted their biology to command different types of magics these days. The great dragons are classical wyverns, 2 legs and their forearms double as wings. Flying Dragon Agheel, who you likely meet very early in your first playthrough, and Flying Dragon Greyll, 2 fire breathers. There's decaying Ekzykes, who has been overcome by the Scarlet Rot and now spreads it to those it hunts. There's Smarag, a glintstone dragon who altered its body and can command glintstone breath due to devouring so many sorcerers. ADULA, another glintstone dragon who actually learned sorcery and can summon a cold magic greatsword. ADULA now guards the Three Sisters area and protects Ranni after being bested by her in combat. And there's Borealis the Freezing, a great frost dragon that can freeze foes solid. The frost dragons were the lords of the mountaintops long ago, until they were defeated by fire giants and chased from the peak. Under the great dragons, there are lesser dragons, which are found in a couple of locations, such as around Greyll. Finally, we have MAGMA wyrms. MAGMA wyrms are not ancient beings of magic that have always been here, no. The origin of the MAGMA wyrms is much more sinister. Okay, remember when I said the Temple of the Dragons, otherwise known as Azula, housed an Elden Lord? This is actually an optional boss you can find towards the end of the game. His name, Dragonlord Placidusaxx, and he is the Dragonlord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. So we know that an Elden Lord serves a god who themselves serve an otherworldly being known as an outer god. There is no mention of who Placidusaxx's god was, and no mention of who the both of them served. At this point, we could say we would never know and move on, but this is a lore speculation video, so let's use some context from the world. Before moving forward, I want to mention 2 of many reoccurring themes throughout Elden Ring, which also happen to be incantations you can acquire on your journey. These are the laws of causality and regression. Causality is a real-world phenomenon heavily rooted in physics, namely within relativistic models. Think Einstein. Causality basically says things influence other things, and the change due to these influence is how some would argue we even experience time, as a universe with no causality would effectively have no meaning for time. Keep all of this in mind for later. things get kind of weird. Regression, at least in context of this game, is the pull of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge. This is effectively reversing causality, but without traveling back through time, a means for all that was separate to once again become whole. Speaking of things that aren't whole, have you taken a closer look at Placidusaxx when you were fighting him? Yes, he is the only two-headed dragon in the game, but if you look closer, there's pretty convincing evidence that Placidusaxx once had 5 heads, the missing 3 each represented by a nub on his upper torso. What else in this game has a version represented by 2 and another by 3? That's right, the fingers. Now, it could have been just a coincidence, and Placidusaxx could have been an Elden Lord such as Godfrey, one who served a god within the world, but this is Miyazaki we're talking about, and coincidences don't exist.
I have touched them. The words of the 3 fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
This quote from Hyeida's questline suggests that before even the Greater Will held any influence over the world, there was a one great. A being we should not only consider an outer god, but the outer god. A being from which all causality in the world can be drawn back to. A being who needed a vassal as a presence in the lands between, and who would take up a consort to become the first Elden Lord. Who was this vassal? I believe the god and the Elden Lord were a 5-headed Placidusaxx, all in the same. And let's be real, is that even a crazy thought? Marika has literally already done this and even procreated with her counterpart, Radahn. I would say this is just normal in the world, and it all leads back to causality and regression. Placidusaxx split and now awaits his counterpart's return, while Radahn felt compelled to leave Rennala and get back to Marika. But what caused Placidusaxx to split? My vote is on the first fractures brought unto the world by the one great itself. No longer being whole, Placidusaxx can no longer create new ancient dragons, and thus we are left with the few that survive today. This fracture also left the lands between vulnerable without a god as the vassal of the Elden power. This left an opening for the Greater Will to impart some of its influence on the world, deploy the Elden Beast, and ascend Marika to godhood. The rest is history, right? Wrong! In fact, the ancient dragons coexisted with the humanoid beings for some time during the Age of Marika, albeit this was after the dragons were defended off from an assault on the Erdtree. This attack was led by Gransaxx, a great ancient dragon. Gransaxx once rained calamity upon the royal capital, the only time in historical record that Leyndell's walls have fallen. This marked the dawn of the war against dragons. You see Gransaxx in the game as well. It is the enormous stone dragon you see in the capital, and why the Bolt of Gransaxx, one of the 9 legendary weapons, can be found in the area. This assault was primarily thwarted by Godwyn the Golden, and through this he earned the respect of, and became friends with, the ancient dragon Fortisaxx. This alliance allowed the dragons to share the great power of the primordial red lightning with the residents of the capital Leyndell, and from this, the capital's ancient dragon cult was spawned. If you look at the Death Lightning incantation, it says that this golden lightning was once wielded by Godwyn, who befriended Fortisaxx. Now, the ancient dragon cult of the capital is not to be confused with the Church of Dragon Communion, who were an order of hunters who killed dragons to feast upon their hearts and unlock their powers. This no doubt also contributes to the lack of dragons we see today, as it takes at least one heart to learn a Dragon Communion incantation, with more powerful spells requiring even more hearts. Practitioners of Dragon Communion would eventually pay for these transgressions, and once they fully succumb to their fate, they are left no more than worms that crawl the earth. We see a few of these wyrms, with the most powerful being Theodorix, a former hero in the War of the Giants, now cursed to crawl the earth upon his belly, a shadow of his former self. This is the origin of the magma wyrms, all of the magma wyrms in the lands between. They are each former practitioners of the Dragon Communion. This is why you find decaying Ekzykes camped outside of the Cathedral of Dragon Communion in Caelid. He is a hunter of communion practitioners. Now, Godwyn's new bestie had a sister, and her name was Lannsseax. Lannsseax was interesting though, and possibly even one of the most important characters in this world. You do fight this ancient dragon. It is an optional boss in the Altus Plateau, but before this time, when Godwyn was alive, Lannsseax transformed into a human, a priestess to commune with the knights of the capital's ancient dragon cult.
Mighty dragon, thou the true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well. Thee now! I am the Lord of all that is golden.
Now let's define the word kindred here. It means one's family and relations. Why would Godric, descendant of Godwyn the Golden, consider dragons to be family? Because they were. It is my theory that I would like to put forward to you that Godwyn and Lannsseax had children. For further proof of this, let's take a look at the incantation you get at the church located next to Lannsseax's fight, the Stormcaller Church. If you loot the chest, you will be rewarded with the Dragon Bolt Blessing. This blessing summons lightning to bolster the caster's body, attacks become easier to deflect, yada yada, but if you go on further, it says, only those loved by dragons can survive the ordeal of cladding their bodies in lightning. Which means, not only could Godwyn and Lannsseax have been in love, but this sounds like it was just a thing that happened. Dragons were apparently turning into people and fall in love with humans, and here we go. However, not all of the children between dragons and humans were to be of the golden lineage, like Godric or Godfroy. Similar to what happened with Morgott and Mohg, some of these children were seen as cursed, and thus we have the dragonkin, a monstrous humanoid race that was banished to the underground Eternal City, where they knew no true sky nor true lightning. Instead, ice lightning was their weapon. The dragonkin never attained immortality like their skyborn kin, and were seen as mere pale imitations. We all know Godwyn was the first to perish of the demigods, but his spirit was actually stored in a curse mark that was separate from his body, the hollow brand that Fia has you seek as part of her quest.
Have you ever seen a hallow brand? When the first of the demigods died, his flesh was marked with the half-wheel wound of the centipede. Godwyn's hallow brand has since been recovered at the Round Table Hold, but there is another hallow brand out there somewhere, and I must find it before the time comes we receive our Lord.
With the Hallowbrand complete and Godwyn being the Prince of Death, Fortisaxx fought long and hard against death within its companion. Alas, victory was never achieved, and its only reward was corruption. We learn this through the remembrance of the Lichdragon, which is a drop from Fortisaxx himself. Through attempting to save his friend, no, his family, Fortisaxx was cursed with death itself, and now remains corrupted as the Lichdragon you fight when you give Fia the curse mark of death, the very vessel of Godwyn's spirit. When Godwyn was slain is when Marika lost it and decided to shatter the Elden Ring, destroying the very order that kept the world together. There is no doubt at this point that she wants her will to be absolute. There would not be another god of this land. With the giants and the Stormlord already defeated thanks to her puppeteering of Godfrey, The last threat in this world that could oppose Marika were the dragons, and their still living Dragonlord, Placidusaxx, who could be found awaiting the return of his god among the ruins of Farum Azula, the legendary Temple of the Sky, of which rubble and ruins exist throughout the lands between. This is where we find Maliketh, Marika's shadow, and the being who wielded the vessel of the Rune of Death within its black blade. Maliketh was a shadow-bound beast given to his Empyrean. Marika's sole need of her shadow was a vessel to lock away destined death. Even then, she betrayed him. What was this betrayal? When you fight Maliketh, you are literally looking at it. Marika locked him away in this realm stuck in time when she ordered Maliketh to take out her enemy in his own domain. How though? Well, going back to the law of causality, we can assume that this is a relativistic world, that is to say, one where gravity has the power to warp space-time itself. We already know gravity plays a major role in this game, and if we look at the ruins greatsword, it says, originally rubble from a ruin which fell from the sky, this surviving fragment was honed into a weapon. One of the legendary armaments, the ruin it came from crumbled when struck by a meteorite. As such, this weapon harbors its destructive power. This weapon's signature ability is Wave of Destruction, and this is a gravity-based attack. Meteorites transferring gravitational power to objects or even living beings is not uncommon in this world. In fact, there is a whole race of beings who were born from such an impact. They are known as the Onyx Lords, and they are revered in fear for their power over destructive gravity. So we know the ruins in the sky got hit with a gravitational impact from a meteor. Who do we know that can command this type of power? Radahn, who just also happens to be one of Marika's demigod offspring, and the most powerful gravitational magic user in the world. I believe Marika ordered Radahn to strike down Farum Azula, and Radahn's strength was such that the impact caused enough of a gravitational distortion to lock the ancient temple in its own realm beyond time. Not unlike how a black hole has enough gravitational force to slow down the flow of time to the point where an observer can't even ever witness someone near the black hole experience aging. Doing so locked away Placidusaxx, Marika's final threat, while at the same time betraying her shadow. A final sign that the path of the greater will was forsaken by its once chosen champion. My goodness, guys, this was insane to research. Thank you so much for sticking through this one. How do you feel about the dragons in Elden Ring? What outcomes can you put together that are different than what I have? Guys, thank you so much for all of the support on these lore videos. I am having a blast making them. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and welcome in. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up because that helps a ton. And if you're interested, I stream every night at twitch.tv/precision. If you want to come hang out in there, talk some Elden Ring, some lore, or any other game. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.